Welcome to the Lightroom section of yesterday's behind the scenes wedding day. Taylor Jackson.
Shooting 67 weddings last year.
Taylor Jackson, welcome.
So Taylor, you are well known in this community. You're an amazing photographer.
Now you might be saying to yourself, Taylor, this set doesn't look so professional. How do you like it now? I have a remote that controls the light. It's a Godox SL60W. It's what I'm using over here as well. Really enjoying them because they're really cheap and inexpensive and they just make things look better. And since I can't really leave home for a little bit, this is what it's gonna be. So thank you for joining me here. And if you're interested, so basically this video is going to be all Lightroom editing for wedding images, making your images look as good as they can, if not even better than you could have ever taken them straight out of camera. Over on Patreon this month is going to be actually there's a lot of ridiculous things happening over there. One is an entire month dedicated just to editing. So we're gonna go through really every aspect possible of editing your wedding images and tips and tricks and just ways to make your images amazing, as well as coming up with a visual style. I feel like it's important to figure that out too. And then also if you sign up in the first week, so if you're watching this video within the first week of April 2020, if you sign up to Patreon for $30, you get access to every single one of my online courses that has ever been created. I'm gonna say there's $2,000 worth of stuff there that you have access to for the $30 Patreon sign-up fee. You also get access to all these presets as well. So don't just buy these presets straight out. That if you're gonna join Patreon, you're gonna get the $2,000 in free courses and all the other content that's on there, like pricing, contract. There's like live first meetings. There's all kinds of stuff, off-camera flash course, posing for Introvert's Guide, and all these presets and a bunch of downloads. So you can head over there and get that as long as this is still the first week of April, because after that, it is over, because it is a crazy deal for a crazy time. Right now, we're gonna go through all of these images, and I'm gonna edit everything that you saw in the video yesterday. Let us begin. I guess maybe if this is your first editing video that you've ever seen from me, you might notice that I like kind of just this color palette a lot. So this is straight out of camera. It's a little bit underexposed. This is just kind of the way that I like my images. You can like them that way or you cannot like them that way. There's lots of other options. So prior, I guess in 2018, this is kind of my style, that everything kind of fit that. And I've kind of evolved a little bit. It's almost like a little bit earthier red tone. So going through all of these, I feel like these are all, like every single preset you could still realistically use for everything. This year specifically, I'm using this as my main preset and version 2 as my secondary preset. So basically if it just affects the colors, if there's something going on that just really doesn't sit well with this, or maybe if it's an extreme close-up of somebody, then I'm rolling over to this. But I feel that specifically this color preset it's been like 15, 20 years of effort to just make it work in every lighting condition. So it is hopefully a preset that you can put across everything, every part of your wedding day, whether it's off-camera flash or whether it's on-camera flash or daytime outside or nighttime outside or daytime like beautiful backlit sun. This preset should work for everything, and that's kind of the way that I've engineered it, I guess, over time, because I want that one-click solution to just make everything. It's kind of like the glue. If you're a musician, maybe like a glue compressor that just kind of like makes everything feel good together. I feel like this is what kind of does that for my wedding images. So when I come in here, usually what I do, so my process would be that I would hit Command A and select everything, and then I would hit Shift Command S. I'm on a Macintosh computer. And I would synchronize all of this across so that everything, with the exception of white balance, exposure doesn't matter because I just kind of launched it. I can do exposure too. So I would do this and I would select and apply this preset to absolutely everything and edit from there. If I get to an image that looks weird, I'm usually clicking this V2. To go down the other ones, black and white, a little grainy. You might also notice that I actually like a little bit of grain in my images. So if you are like, hey, Taylor, why does your preset add grain? You can just come down here and get rid of that grain if you don't want that grain, and now you have no grain. I like texture. I'll take this away if it is a very high ISO image, but for the most part, most images, even if they are a high ISO, it's kind of fine. Moving down here, so styled is another preset. Should find a better image to show you all these on. Here, we'll find something like this. So kind of cycling through everything. Color, a little overexposed there, but it's because it increases your exposure. And somewhere like that is kind of where I'd have that. I'd probably bring in the background a little bit. And there's other things you can do as well, like little gradient filters to bring in the background. This is shot in good lighting conditions for their faces, but bad lighting conditions for the sun in the back there. My subtle preset is just a very, very subtle touch. I use that one quite a lot as well. And then styled is like, it's pretty heavy, and you have to, it kind of almost has to be the right couple to use that for the entire gallery. It's very contrasty. I use this a lot for kind of model style shoots, or basically if I know that somebody has had professional makeup done, so I'm not gonna use this in a usual branding session with just a friend, but if I know that they've had good professional makeup done and hair, and that it can basically take the abuse of that contrast, I'm using the styled preset for that. And then these are just some other ones as well. And if you buy them, so straight out, you can buy the top ones here, but if you're a Patreon member, you get access to all the other ones. And then down here into my destination wedding presets. And I would say that this one is kind of my second favorite overall. That maybe it doesn't work super well in this lighting condition, but I like the Mexico preset. I would say Mexico, color are my two favorites. And even if you're not in Mexico, but if you are in Mexico and it's a very, very nice blue day, with some nice sun and clouds, you're probably in pretty good shape with that preset. So I think we're gonna do everything with 2019 color today. We're gonna start here. That image is kind of one click done. I might make it a little brighter. You might notice that my images are sometimes wildly underexposed straight out of camera, and that is because usually I have my D-lighting set to extra high, specifically so I can see what I'm shooting for video, and then I also have it set for extra high for photo, so the JPEGs look awesome. But what happens is that it makes the image overall, like it brings the shadows up and makes things a little bit brighter. So if I'm underexposing in camera, in the raw file, the JPEG display image that it's showing me is being affected by the D-lighting, and it is usually a little bit brighter. So sometimes, I don't know, things are a little bit different than they should be, I guess. So this is shot with my 35mm lens and an off-camera flash. That looks pretty nice for crop. And I just thought I'd show you the kind of the before and after. Something like that looks pretty nice. I like the way that it's just a little different. It's not a traditional style shot. I might relax a little bit of the grain on that because I feel like that's just like maybe a little bit too much. Something like there is nice. And I'm pretty happy with that. If you really wanted to get into it, you can make a little graduated filter, double click these to make them disappear, and maybe a little bit, make the ring pop a little bit more. Something like that looks pretty nice. Center composition, whether you like center compositions or not, that is totally up to you. Moving over here, and click this again. Just showing you the before and after previews. These were two different lighting situations for off-camera light. One, somewhat more normal one, happy with that. Two, somewhat much more extreme. And you can really see the colors kind of come out of this. So I'm gonna leave it somewhere like that because I feel like the red bottoms are kind of the focal point for that. But then also I feel like the red bottoms are kind of almost pink. So if you ever notice that colors are a little bit weird, you can come down here and you can actually change the color. So if you want those orange Louboutins, you can do it. I would say somewhere around there is more real. And boom. I'm actually gonna copy this because I feel like it's gonna do the same thing. Way too bright, bring that down. This is a bit of a challenging shot. Usually my images I'm not shooting in such wild conditions, but I figured I would demonstrate a little more off-camera flash today. I'm gonna brighten the ring up a little bit here. And rather than just like cranking the exposure, because it's gonna look dumb, I'm going to bring the contrast down and the shadows up just a little bit. And I'm actually going to add a little clarity and texture. And I'm gonna make it a little bit brighter too. There we go. So that's how the image started. That's how it looks now. Pretty happy with it. I'm gonna do a little spot removal here. We'll get more in depth into all things editing in Patreon this month. But for now, this is kind of the quick and dirty way that if you're ever just in a situation you're like they might print that image, that might end up in an album, but I don't know if it's like that key quintessential image and you just want to clean it up a little bit, that's how you do it. Moving out here, outside, I am fine to crank a little bit of texture when we're actually outside. I want to see those nice fluffy clouds and try to make those lines a little straighter. I like that. This is a distracting element down here. I might paint that out. Goodbye, friend. Boom. Now it's gone. There we go. A little natural vignette in there. It's just a graduated filter, the one that we set up earlier. Pretty happy with that. It might look a little underexposed, and if you really wanted to get into it, you could kind of just like go through here with one of these brushes here, and you could do something like this and just kind of brighten up what you want. Another thing that I'll mention here that I'll get in more detail with is that usually I use a tablet. So this is the Wacom, I think it's like the medium size of the Pro tablet. And I use it for pretty much anything when it comes to travel and landscape. For weddings, I don't use it as much, but if you ever have those images, it's just like, that's the one, that's the image that I need to like make perfect. You can hide a lot of edits and it feels a lot more organic when you're editing with a pen because you have pressure sensitivity. So you can just draw lightly if you just want very little of it to take effect rather than clicking and dragging and playing with the opacity of everything. This one is a victim of de-lighting, and that's why it's underexposed. That on my screen, it looked perfect. In the JPEG preview, it also looked really, really great. I'd say somewhere around there is pretty good. And I'm gonna pump some of those shadows up. And you can even get more advanced if you want and do something like bring the exposure down in the sky just to make it a little more blue. Or if you just wanna like completely screw everything up, you just take the blue and you just like crank it. And there you go. Now you made a terrible wedding image. Don't do that, but you can make it a little bit more in reality. That's basically the workaround. You can bring a circular polarizer, you can put the polarizer on, but it's quite honestly just as easy to do that. It's not quite the same. It's whatever. For a wedding, I feel like you kind of get away with that. With a circular polarizer, it would have taken a lot of the reflection, maybe off of this and off of this and off of this, and it would have made the sky a lot darker and deeper. The other benefit of a circular polarizer is if you're photographing people with bald heads, say the groom has a bald head today, it makes it very easy to get that reflection off, or at least to minimize the reflection coming off their head if you have a circular polarizer and you set it up so that it just kind of like affects only the top of their head. That's the thing that works 60% of the time, every time. Doesn't work every time though. All right, that looks good. Pretty happy with that. Moving along, I feel like I can just click previous now. If you just want to copy over the previous settings, you just click the previous button. This is a lot kind of going on in an image. I feel like it exists. I don't even know if this was in the video yesterday. It exists. I feel like this is an image that's for the couple. That's not going to be something that's going to end up anywhere for me necessarily. This was taken out of my personal interest for delicious desserts. And because again, not people, 100% texture, getting wild. Let's do 100% cupcake texture too. That looks nice. It's a little, I feel like I should have taken that half step over. When I crop, I try to keep the same-ish proportions. You can lock the aspect ratio if you want so that, that basically your frame scales the same, but I don't see a lot of people printing a lot of things, so I'm not too worried about keeping it exactly a 4:6 aspect ratio or an 8:10 or whatever. Cool, moving on. All right, now into the fun image is, that's pretty much good. That was one click. That went from, yeah, that image is okay. It looks pretty nice. You can tell that the lighting's there. You can tell that it could be a good image, and then you just hit that. And life is good, and it's done. I'm gonna clean up that one security light. Maybe this light over here too. And yeah, super happy with that. When we went in here, we actually got them to turn off all these lights. If these lights would have been on, there just would have been some unnecessary orange kind of in the frame. And to get good clean light is important because now you can kind of change things a little bit more, like depending on how you want to frame it, that you can go from this to that in just a couple of seconds, which I am super happy with. And she moved slightly, but, or I moved, I guess. She didn't move. I think that looks pretty good. Can we do it again? Previous? Almost. There we go. I feel like the white balance changed a bit in that shot. I'm just getting further away. It's like the Homer Simpson, like just going into the bushes. So the feeling that I'm getting from that. All right, so this is definitely going to, that actually kind of works. So I'm gonna get rid of maybe the one on this side, but I am going to maybe amp up this graduated filter. So when you click previous, all of the previous stuff comes along. And it's a little too blue, so I'm gonna add a little bit of temperature, a little bit of warmth to there. And as you can see, that's how it began. That's an okay image. Heck of a lot better in just a couple of seconds. This should be the exact same. Click previous, almost exactly the same. I'm gonna grab this gradient filter one more time, and it's a little better. Moving on next, you can see my flash stand in the background. It might be a thing that only I can see, but I'm still gonna get rid of it. That's probably not the correct place to take that sample from. It looks nice. I'm gonna get rid of this guy too. What are you doing up here? Bye-bye. Cool. Super happy with that. From there to there, which I'm happy with. Where did I start? Somewhere over here. So you can just click on whatever image, and then you can go over here and then click previous from that. So it'll take those images, or it'll take the settings from that last image you were in. It doesn't take them from chronologically the previous one. It doesn't pull from 20 to when you click previous. And I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like it's a little off center. So I'm gonna crop in a little this way. I wanna leave most of the veil and maybe down to there. I feel like that's a nice photo. Next up, getting a little heavier into this off-camera flash experience. Cool. I like how that looks. I'm going to play with just some of these to make things a little more dynamic. And if you wanted to, you could just use this brush and you could just paint everything in and draw like your own little vignette. It's also completely to your taste that if you like the look of this, if you like kind of the center, just the pop of light happening there, that's awesome. You can do that. If you don't, you can not do that too. Don't take my word as the end all on wedding photography. If you see something that I do that you're like, I don't like that, just don't do it. You know, don't get angry, and don't try to be someone you're not. I thought about getting a loop deck. I used a loop deck for a little while, and quite honestly with wedding images, I find that for the most part, a lot of it is just clicking the previous button, as you're seeing me do right here. That might have been a little too dark in the suits. I think it's still nice. There's still detail. You can still tell what it is. I think for weddings, and this is maybe a testament, if you're watching this video and you're not yet shooting manual, and you're like, oh, like I'd be so much cooler if I shot manual. Don't shoot manual to be cool or to like tell other people that you shoot manual. Shoot manual, if only, as you saw me edit all of these images, that I could have just clicked one and I could just sync all of the settings across the board, as long as I didn't crop weird and change the way my camera is. I have a tilt a lot of the time. But by just having the exact same settings, you can just click the previous button and everything just looks good. There is like a match, like color and exposure option, but I think it's just a lot easier to do this. Kid in the background here. I tried my best not to include too many kids in these videos because I get clearance from most of the parents, but I want to make sure if I don't 100% remember that I don't want to put their kids in a video. So that one, I don't think it's gonna make the video. You already knew that because you watched the video. I'm recording this before I do the video, so I'm kind of guessing at what I'm using. Out of context, I feel like it needed that last shot to be good there. I'm a little too, so basically what's happening here, you can't really see it in the on-camera video, but I'm shooting kind of like this, so I have what I think is my frame, and I'm taking photos while I'm looking this way for the bride to be in kind of that perfect spot to flip. So that's why my framing is a little bit wacky some of the time, but to clean that up, just kind of bring that down, bring this out. I don't want to crop in too far on the side, because if I crop in too far on the side, it starts to just feel like a standalone image, and I want to kind of read, I guess this is kind of rule of thirds, that maybe the perfect place would be if his eyes were like right there. That you can tell he's kind of like looking off into the distance at his bride. And then next image, boom, story getting even better. There's people in the background, so like basically my option would be to Photoshop out their coordinators, or if I just kind of let that go a little bit, it becomes a lot less of a distraction. So technically you might be like, oh, it's like the highlights are so blown in this photo. And I think that I did that intentionally to bring focus back to what's happening in here. So I'm okay with letting that technical flaw go to kind of make my image overall a heck of a lot better. This isn't a very strong image. Maybe it is. He's crying over here. I kind of like that. Maybe that's nice. And again, because there is a lot going on, I'm going to just kind of frame with some gradient filters here. And this is a case that I would love to have the detail back here, but I think that that just might be too far gone. It's like the sun is just right on it. Technically, there's not a whole lot I can do. Let's see if it's even, yeah. So it's, even if you come all the way down, you can still tell that there's not a whole lot of detail. If I was shooting JPEG, like I did for my first like 10 weddings, I don't recommend that you shoot JPEG ever for weddings, because there's just, it's a white dress and a black suit most of the time, or it's a lot of contrasting colors and elements. So shoot RAW if you're not yet shooting RAW, obviously. Also, all these presets are geared for RAW files, so if you're trying to load a JPEG into it and you're trying to apply this preset, it's probably not gonna look so good. It's gonna do some weird things, and it's gonna try to go too outside of the bounds of what a JPEG is and what data exists in it, and try to switch too many things. So I recommend shooting RAW. Cards are inexpensive now, so hopefully you have many cards. I don't love this pole, but I'm gonna live with it, because if I try to get rid of it, I bet in Photoshop, so in Patreon, this is like the absolute dumbest way I've ever, you can select that. Yeah, it's perfect right there. That's okay. If you're a member of Patreon, we'll get into removing elements in different ways. So what you would want to do in this case is to go into Photoshop and do content aware. And there's, I would say, a 90% chance that that would just disappear if you did a good content aware fill. There we go, I figured it out. I rotated a little bit. I feel like most of the time when I'm shooting that I know kind of what I'm after, and then I do a lot of variations of it on site so that when I get back to my computer, I can actually pick the one that's the best. So again, kind of struggling to keep the details in the background. It's definitely a very, very high contrast scene. So I was kind of exposing in the middle here, so they're a little bit too under and it's a little too exposed out over here. So I did that intentionally to try to save what I could to at least have some detail there. And technically, like, that could be an exposure that you could like, and if you like that exposure, go with that. For me, I'm always kind of exposing the best I can for skin tones, so somewhere around there is probably a little bit better. As I said, the background is kind of a little too hot, a little too gone, but I'm okay with that. That's like they're just in a studio now. So maybe one thing, I feel like this one needs to come back a little too much. So I can use my gradient filters to just like bring in the, maybe I don't need that much up top, but at least it brings in a little bit of detail. So I went from, I don't know, you see what it did, clicking the buttons. And then hopefully I didn't move too much and I can just click previous. Doesn't work so well. I'm going to build my gradient filters again here. And again, nothing wrong if you want to spend the time and you want to actually go through and just do this. For images like this, I think it would be important to actually get it 100% right. So you can go in and you can paint everything. So let's do that for this image to make it as good as it can be, because it's not going to be a perfect image just because the technical abilities of kind of what's going on are beyond what a camera is capable of. So I have right now, I'm on my tablet and I have exposure at -1 and highlights down, and I'm just going to kind of start painting and see kind of how that feels. And that's okay there. I'm gonna build a new one, and then I'm going to go just after kind of this fence here. You can set up masks, and basically so it just stops if it sees something, so like a contrast point like his suit, that it would just kind of stop and it wouldn't actually affect anything that is obviously not what you're trying to paint. And that's helpful, but I feel that when it does hard stops like that, you start to see a little bit of banding almost, and I would rather just kind of paint it in myself here. Oops. There we go. Perfect. And I'm gonna build one more new one, and then I'm actually going to go in and do something like this and actually kind of paint a little back into their faces. Cool, so that's how I would do that image. That takes a little bit longer, but it is kind of one of those quintessential images, so it's worth the time and effort to make it as good as it can be. I can no longer copy previous, because that last one I did a lot of brushwork too. I think that's good enough for me. I'm pretty happy with that. Again, if I wanted to go into every individual image and paint that fence back, I could, but I feel like my couple is totally cool with kind of the way that looked there. All right, that looks good. Thumbs up, being married. I wish I feel like this is a shot that happens a lot, that the minister or the officiant's always just like kind of in the background there. I wish that they would do first kiss, and when they do first kiss, my ideal would be that they are like, you may now you may now do the kissing, and they would just leave at that point, or they would announce it from like as they are moving away, so that they're not always in the background of the photo, because like as you can see, every kiss photo, it's like, great, who's this behind? I don't know. I try my best to hide them. Like, who's this over here? Just creeping through. I don't know. It's a known part of the wedding. It's not like it's a surprise. It's the officiant's there. I guess he's a part of the day. But I'm gonna get rid of that photo. Kind of half blink. She looks good, but he half blinks, so that image goes away. Usually, what I'm looking for, if it is kind of male-female style wedding, most of the time, if she looks good and he looks 75% as good as he would normally look, I usually leave that image in, but in the case of the last one, I'm okay to let it go, because there were a lot of other images that I could use. This is okay. This is always hard, because this is kind of like a documentary style image, and I try to like make eye contact so they know I'm actually taking photos, and then the bridesmaids, hopefully everybody kind of understands what's going on too. So first image was kind of getting there. And then I feel like everyone was like, oh, he's taking photos. I'll kind of be happier than I would normally be. And again, like this, theoretically for the sky, this would probably be the correct exposure. For skin tones though, everybody looks a heck of a lot better like that. So you can bring down a little bit of gradient filter if you want, or you can paint it back if you're inclined to do so. But I don't want it to like come all the way back like that, like full, I don't know, darkness. I want to leave it kind of a little bit maybe too overexposed, that kind of feels a little bit more correct with the image. Let's figure out what we can do with this. That just looks great. Cool. That was easy. So this was basically, we knew that there was going to be a cloud, and as soon as there was a cloud, that I was going to do all the family photos kind of like, well, we had no cloud, because I feel like this looks nice. And then ideally, I guess, as really any wedding photographer, you're most ideal is like, oh, you want that cloud to come in, you want that nice clean light. But when that cloud comes in, you lose a little bit of the contrast. So the colors aren't quite as vibrant kind of everywhere in the scene when a cloud comes in. And because the scene is now a little bit darker, if you do have blue sky in the background or clouds that are in sun, those are going to be a lot quicker to overexpose. So I don't know, there's no winning. You just kind of keep doing stuff and you figure out what you like, and that might change every year. I don't know. I try my best to keep it kind of the same, because I know that couples that hired me last year want what they hired me to do last year, so I don't try to iterate too rapidly. But for the most part, like, your tastes can evolve and they can change. So don't be stressed if you like a different thing next year than you did this year. Moving to this image, I think that looks pretty nice. And as you can see, when the shade comes in, so these were seconds apart. And really, really nice, clean light. Doing what I can to kind of get her full dress, her full veil in here. But you can see that this is okay. This is a little too harsh, a little too squinty. And then as soon as I get that nice little patch of sun, everything just feels better. So do your best to find a shade spot when possible. But know that if you can't find one, that you can get by with kind of this look. And basically what it is that if they're facing me, the sun is hopefully over one of their shoulders. So I'm kind of pivoting around to make sure that happens. And my backgrounds are always secondary, that if I am basically at a loss, like I don't want to shoot a beautiful background if everybody's going to be squinting and just looking bad because they're looking directly into the sun. So I would rather shoot this way and maybe get a less ideal background if the people in the image look a lot better. I don't know if that one's gonna make the cut. There we go. So this is kind of me pivoting around. So the sun, if the sun was out, would be right at their backs. And I feel like it's important to be aware of that also when you're in the shade. And it kind of all comes down to how the day goes. That if you're in the shade, but the shade is like, if they're to look in the direction of the sun and it's really, really bright and they can't see a whole lot, or they're squinty because it's a bright shade, don't do that. Shoot in this direction. Today was specifically one of those days that even in the shade, it's still kind of little squint. So that's why I specifically did that. This I underexposed because I don't know. I already explained why I underexpose things. I don't have to explain again. Always get that shot of the back of the bride's dress. I feel like that's an important shot that a lot of photographers do miss from time to time, that it's not one of those that's like the instant go-to. I think through my posing guide that is available on Patreon, Introvert's Guide to Posing, or if you sign up in the first week, you get the full guide. One of the steps in that is to just basically have couples moving all the time. So if they're walking away and they're coming back towards you, just photograph them as they walk away. It's a lot easier to get. Your yield is super high when they're not looking at the camera, simply because, I don't know, they don't have to make a good face, that the dress is doing all the work. As you can see, a little bit bright. I don't know, I kind of want to keep the color palette the same, so I'm gonna leave it as it is there. I'm pretty happy with it, but if it was shady, I would have been okay to lose a little bit of the saturation. I almost feel like I have to just paint in a little bit of exposure here on her back, because I feel like I kind of lose that. So just a little circle with this. Did that and brighten it up a bit. Heck of a lot better. Look at how much better that image is. Who's that guy that shot that first image? I don't know. I might need to do the same little paint here as well. I don't really know what the veil's doing. I think we were trying to throw it around, but we didn't do it correctly, and now it's kind of off to the side. It probably was doing a thing, and then I just didn't get there in time, or the video team was doing it. So now we're in the forest, and I actually cleaned up really well. I expected a lot more green to be pulled in. So my big tip for shooting in a forest is to have people looking towards where there's good light. That if we were, for instance, if I was to the right, so if I walked over this way and she was facing me in that direction, all the light that was coming onto her face would have been all just kind of green light from the forest and just dark light. And that would have made for a very challenging image, but because the only light is coming from kind of over my back left shoulder, just like my super awesome blue light over here. So pretend the blue light is the sun, and that's kind of where, or at least the light was coming from in that direction. So yeah, always be aware of that bad green forest light. Everyone's like, oh, there's shade in the forest. Like, no problem, we'll get some great photos. And if you don't do it right, everybody's gonna be real green. There's a few images coming up that I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit more. So in good clean light, again, shooting manual, everything should just be kind of previous. I'm gonna rotate that one though, because that one's real slanty. Boom. I don't try to do anything too crazy with my couples. I don't make them like do piggybacks or run and jump and like do crazy stuff. I find this off-camera light. I just find that, I don't know, it's a better experience kind of this way to just take normal photos. Wedding photography, in my opinion, again, you can have a completely different opinion. You don't have to, I don't have to be right in this. We can all be right together. I don't necessarily need the wedding photography to be like the thing that, like the fun part of the day. That I would rather just kind of get everything good, documented, clean light, people looking good, people happy with how they look in the photos, and not worry too much about like all the crazy shots that like later next year aren't going to be so great anymore. It's like a little sunspot up here that I wish that I would have moved them like this way a little bit. It's always hard because there's so many heads, and the leaves, if it's a windy day, the leaves, they move. So by like just kind of moving people around, that sometimes it's like, oh, there's like a little spot here, and then you move everyone a half step forward, and then there's just like blinding sun on the side of the bride's face or something. So do the best you can and try to not stress yourself out. If you wanted to, I bet we could do this with a little brush here and save it a little bit. I also think as photographers, I should turn the mask on, that we overthink a lot of things that clients won't even notice. There's a 0% chance that I think anyone will really notice that her hair was a little bit too hot. But as a photographer, if for like that one individual image that I know they're gonna want, looks great. I don't mind going in and just kind of making it perfect. This is perfect. Do you think it's overexposed? No, that's great. Look at that. That's cool. So it goes from this, it's like, oops, to it's just great. I like it. And again, if you want, I personally like this image the way it is, but if you wanted to, you could kind of come in here and you could bring back some of the grasses. That doesn't work so well. You can see that I kind of clipped out some of the stuff up there. And then also a little darkness here. And then I grab my brush. I'm getting really into it today. And I can paint back a little bit of what's going on back here. Just get a little more detail. There we go. You can see that I clipped this color, that color is too hot, but I don't think that they're ever gonna notice that. So don't be too hard on yourself and just try to get people looking good. And if they look good in that photo, she looks great in that photo, she's gonna be happy. So don't stress too much about the technical as long as the lighting is good. That image is gonna go away. That wasn't the best one from that set. I also am just editing a selection. So these are 130 photos from this wedding day. I'm going to say I gave them probably 1,200 total. So just know that you're not seeing absolutely everything, but you are seeing something from each individual, I guess, subsection of the day. That's a little too bright in the background, but again, I don't think that they'll care. Everybody looks good, everybody's in the shade. This is the best possible situation right now. This is one time that I guess my back is kind of to all of the bushes and the trees. So to get them as close to kind of where this light is. So the good light is technically coming from this side. And we shot a few photos with them facing the other way with me standing where the good light was coming from, which is kind of best practice. So we did those photos and then I spun everyone around just to get a different background. And because they were close enough, basically the light is kind of bouncing off of everything that's over here and coming back a little bit on them. And I'm compensating by adding a little bit more exposure to brighten them up, but they don't get that big green cast that this image specifically has. So let's click this button and see, it's starting to get better. So use a dropper tool if you're ever just like, I don't know what that white balance is. And then I'm gonna warm it up a little bit. I feel that the Lightroom dropper always kind of picks up just a little bit too either magenta or a little bit too cold. I feel like I wish that there was, so on your camera, if you're on your camera and your white balances, let's do a little demo here. So you're in your white balances and they put the white balance button on this Nikon D780 right above the quality button. So you just like hate your life all the time because you're like, am I changing the white balance or am I taking my camera off of RAW? I don't know. So in white balance, there are a few numbers up top here. So up top here on auto white balance, you can see keep white and just reduce warm colors. So basically I think that that's what Lightroom kind of does. And I don't know if there's a way to set it so that it doesn't do that. And then next one, I'm just moving the front wheel here, says keep overall atmosphere. So it'll evaluate everything that's going on and it will decide, do I just, if there's this one warm light, do I change the entire scene to compensate for that? Or do I just keep overall atmosphere, which I like. And then keep warm lighting colors. I don't even know if you can see that. Keep warm colors right there. Hopefully you can see that. So keep warm colors is what I want. Anyways, back to the thing that we were doing. I'm gonna bring that vignette in. That looks pretty nice. Some very distracting highlights right here, unfortunately, but not a whole lot I can do with that. I don't really want to just go stomping around bushes. You can if you're into that type of thing, but I'm not into stomping bushes. This was shot from my Nikon. You can see the colors just like, yeah, how much magenta you want. The Nikon Z6 files, specifically, I don't know, maybe this was before I updated the firmware. This was from a little while ago now. Potentially maybe it just kind of, everything was magenta. All of my presets, if I clicked them with my Nikon Z6, I had to manually adjust the white balance, even if I shot the white balance correct in camera. So that's kind of why that happened there. Cool. It's waiting for a thing to happen, and it already happened. We go back to the image. Everything is just, that looks all right. Cool. And because they are a little bit cooler, I'm gonna warm them up a bit. Great. Let's see. I was gonna do previous, but I'm not going to. That looks nice. I like that. I wish that I could rotate it just a little bit more without clipping his foot off. Or I wish that there was some sort of option that I could click that it would just like try to make up background. So if I just drag this down, it would try to just figure out what kind of background should go in there, like content aware fill. So I feel like that's too close of a crop. How about this one? Again, same issue, just nicely off center. Also, I do like that you can see a little bit of the interior of his jacket here. I don't like that you can see his sunglasses. So I'm gonna go and get rid of those sunglasses for him. It didn't really work very well. We'll zoom in and do things a little bit more properly. What the most ideal situation would be in Photoshop. So Lightroom is it's pretty good at most things, but Photoshop is just a very powerful image editor overall. So it can just handle things that Lightroom cannot. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna see if anyone notices in the actual video, because that looks a little crazy. And if somebody calls me out on it before you've watched this, if you're watching this and you go and call it out, it's not a thing. But if somebody notices that, I hope they do. I hope so. All right, coming in. Always challenging because these people at the doors, it's like you're always in the photos and they have to be happy and sometimes they're not and sometimes they struggle to open the door and whatever. You understand. Weddings are hard. Previous, again, shooting manual, trying to get those images of each individual person as well as a group of them. So that is the individual human that came in. This is a group of humans, 2 to be exact, humans that came in. I feel like my preset also goes very well with the colors of dresses and ties. So in this specific case, it works kind of on multiple levels like that. Otherwise, it just kind of works well too. That's funny, right? There's a child covering his ears. Paint this out again. If you have, did a very terrible job. If you have just tape, you can just go and tape. No, don't do that. That's what they do in Hollywood productions. If it's like an exit sign, someone will just go up and like gaff tape it out. So if it's out of focus in the background, you won't really notice it. But I feel like you're not supposed to do that because of, I don't know, fire codes and whatnot. So don't do that if you're a wedding shooter. A little magenta tweaked here. See, as I said, just goes like super blue, but usually it gets the magenta green mix correct. So back to that, looks good. They're in a different pocket of light. The last people were facing the opposite direction and they're facing into the windows, so good light. I always position myself and try to make everything happen as best I can if I'm standing kind of at the window. And you'll actually see as I rotate around over here that how things change a little bit. So this is lit by window light, and you can see this is like just really, really nice lighting. This is the opposite direction. This is kind of the bounce that's coming off the wall, and it's okay. This is my off-camera light creeping through, but you can see that it's starting to pick up tones that should not be there, and it's a better situation for me to stand where my flash is rather than over here. This is kind of a mix of the two, so you can see kind of the warm light up here, coming from over on this side, and then the window light kind of on her back there. This is from the Z6. We'll see how this does with magenta. That looks pretty nice. I like this 35. It's a pretty nice 35. It's just the Z35S Nikkor 1.8. I know all the product names, I promise. Looks good. I don't know if this is like heavy vignetting or if this is just that he was actually just in the shade, but I'm gonna help him out a little bit so at least he's somewhat visible. You too. Cool. Moving on. This is, if you missed yesterday's video, or what I assume I will talk about because I haven't made that video yet. What I'm talking about here is simply how the lighting changes. So as you can see, the lights turning off and on. This is just all natural light. So while the LED lights turn off and on very, very fast, if you're shooting a high shutter speed, sometimes some of them will be on. I think there's a better example coming up in a minute here. But this is an example of when all of the LEDs just happen to be off and it looks really good. And then this is when they're kind of back on, and these are back-to-back frames. So be aware you can bring your shutter, if you can bring your shutter speed down to something like, I don't know, even I find 1/100th of a second is even challenging with some LEDs like these ones that I think they're LED bulbs that are not supposed to be on dimmers, which is why they're like even more erratic than a usual LED light. But the lower your shutter speed can get, the better for it. And essentially the thing is that it's just a refresh rate, so they're on like a 60 hertz refresh rate, and if you can shoot at 1/60th of a second and the refresh rate is also 1/60th of a second on the lights, you can usually get them to all stay on or appear to be on in the frame. But if you're shooting at like 2,000th of a second, it just makes everything, I don't know, like you'll just get that disco dance party. Shooting through some curtains or something here? What's going on? This is the Tamron life. So maybe, I don't know. It's just, I think I'm just getting hit by the light up here and it's just a weird flare. Way underexposed. This is here to show you specifically the lights turning off and on though. So I'll roll through these quickly and edit them. And then, or even if you just watch while I'm editing, you can see that like this light right now is on, this one is off, these three are off. Next frame, this one is on, this one is on, this one is off, this one is off. So as you can see, big struggle if you are shooting, if you're trying to shoot ambient within that environment, that it's just like, it's just gonna be chaos and everywhere. This is like perfectly exposed. What do you guys think? Right? That one's okay. I don't like that image as much as I like the other ones. It's always a bit of a surprise when you underexpose that hard. When you brighten them up, what are their faces gonna look like? Are they blinking? I don't know. This is nice. I like this. This is why I love the 7200, that you can just get all these different kind of frames as they walk around, and you can just, I don't know, you don't have to chase them around. You don't have to make them do things over and over again. When they're standing still, something like a 35 prime is quite nice. This is the Nikon 35mm Nikkor S f1.8 Z. I'm kidding, that's not the product name, but a little too magenta-y. Plus side, that you always have a white balance point, because usually you're either working with a black suit or a white dress, so you always have something there. I'm actually gonna do this, and I'm actually just gonna crank that to see where my limit is. And then, because I know this is gonna be one of the better images from the day, if I just crank that. I feel like it affected his face a little too much. I'm gonna do that. And I might even go into post-production and bring back a little bit more of the sky, and by that I mean paint it back, because it's not there. I like this photo a lot. This photo might look like it's from 2012 though. That's not where when you use the dropper, you don't pick the grass. If you pick the grass, you're gonna have a bad time. I don't know, I kind of like that it's just super wrong. So in my brain, I'm like, I'm gonna leave it, and then I realize that I should probably dial it back just a little bit. I feel like that's another helpful tip, is that whenever you're like, wow, that looks amazing, and you did something like pretty extreme, always just like dial it back just a little bit. Otherwise, you're gonna hate it in a couple of weeks. Back to the 35 Z that's a little too magenta. It's a bit of a weird photo now that I stare at it for too long. I like this one. It's a very soft image. Nope, don't need any of that. Just the way it is. Just the way you are. Is that a song? If not, it is right now. Again, it's like, it's almost too much, but I kind of really like it. This is coming from a number of elements. The flare is probably because the front element of my lens is a little bit dirty, which I actually kind of like. And the way that my preset kind of just handles this is what's going on here. Again, I like that. It's technically incorrect, but I'm happy with it. I selected a bunch of these because I knew one of these was going to be like one of the photos from the day. So that's why there's a few different variations of it. Cool. I like that. Very golden, very, I feel like those are your good sales and marketing images that if you have a few of those in your portfolio, people can really envision themselves in a moment like this on their wedding day. And I feel like as a sales and marketing image, this is like a 10 out of 10. Even if it's not technically the best photo, if you can't even see their faces, I think that's actually what makes it a good marketing image, because now they can envision themselves in the photo rather than them just like, I don't know, seeing direct faces and being like, oh, my eyes aren't that color, or whatever small thing it might be that pulls them out of the image. Whenever they can't see, or whenever it's like holding hands walking away from the camera, people can picture themselves in those images a little bit better. And this image that I just went back to here, this is like them getting into a weird position that I think the video team put them in. And I like the getting into the pose better than the actual pose by a long shot in this case. Again, leaving these way too warm, but I like them a lot. I'm gonna crank so basically what's happening is to maintain the consistency of everything. Over here, I'm catching that flare that's lighting up the front element of my lens a little bit, giving me that nice orange glow. Moving over here, I have to kind of like crank this up to even match remotely close to what we did there. And then here we're back to flare, so I'm gonna go to over here, copy from that previous. It's a good sunset. I feel like this is just a nice summer day. Just feels like a nice summer day, right? Again, in between moment, just her, it's windy, moving her hair. This is one of my favorite images. I don't know why. It just really feels really nice to me. I feel like I can just like picture that moment. I feel like it's clean. There's good lines. It's not the best composition, I guess, but overall, I'm like, I don't know. I just like it. I almost like it better just like straight to the camera. But to match with all my other images, I have to switch it up a little bit. That is just wildly, maybe that's what happened. So I'm gonna go back to that image and I'm gonna select, there we go. The weird magenta clip of that Nikon Z6 changed things up. And I don't know if it's actually the camera. I'll state this again. I don't know if it was the camera or if it was just the pre-firmware or what the deal is, because none of my images since this wedding have reacted in that same way. Like that. I feel like, I'm gonna go back to that image. I feel like I was just a little bit too high. I wish I would have just crouched down just a little bit. Maybe I can do it this way. No, I can't. That's the way it's gonna be. I wish I was more on this kind of eye line with her rather than kind of pointed more down, I feel like. I guess it works, but I feel like this would have been a better photo for me. This is, I think, the quintessential look and feel of this 35mm for the Z series and why I like it so much. So I feel like this is like, maybe ignore the fact that I cropped off his feet at a weird spot. I might move that crop up a little bit. So the thing that I like is that natural vignette kind of coming down from down there. So when I crop it, I actually get rid of the thing that I like, which is a bit of a bummer. So getting I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I've lost all focus and balance in my life. So rotating like this, man, I wish I just would have got a little more down. So the benefit of specifically of shooting full frame as well as shooting these images, I feel like I just robbed all the life out of this image, that it began as something that I enjoyed. I'm gonna leave it technically sideways. It's a fun, playful image. The reason that I like specifically full frame is because it gives you the full lens. So all of these, what would be considered like defects, you can see the kind of vignetting coming in and just the way that everything just comes together. I like all of that. And when you start to crop in, so if I was shooting this lens on a crop sensor camera, my frame would be this, and I would essentially cut out all of those defects that I think give it character overall. That said, the 35 is like probably the best 35 that Nikon has ever made. The Z Series 1. Cool. So this is a reason why shooting something like a 7200 is important, that you actually get that separation. That if I didn't have separation and it was just everything was in focus here, this image would be an absolute nightmare. But you can shoot this image with them in focus. You can shoot this image with the people up there in focus. My cameras were a little bit out of sync, I guess. Kind of a nice photo. Again, cropping, getting rid of like just a little bit of the stuff that I like, but now we are inside. His shirt is not white. I thought it could have been white. His pants are gray. Can we get it's a good enough white balance point. Somewhere like that. Probably warm it up a little bit. I like to go on the warm side of things. I think this looks pretty nice. What do you think? Couple here. Going to make it a little bit warmer. This is kind of where I shoot from, so usually the thought, the go-to would be, oh, I'm gonna be in the center of the room in front of the podium where they're going to be looking. They never look straight up that way. They're always looking usually at parents or family that they're talking to or at their wedding parties. So I park myself kind of behind the wedding party because I know they're gonna be looking in my direction for most of their speech. I don't even know what's in the corner here. Looks like a DJ booth. I think this is for demonstration purposes of off-camera flash, different places you can put it. And then some off-camera flash in the nighttime, right? So with these off-camera flashes, you can just put them wherever kind of reflects the most light, and you can just cover the dance floor, and you can cover pockets of the dance floor, and just make sure everything's good and lit, and make your life a little bit easier as a photographer rather than like chasing people around and trying to get those shots with a flash on your camera, pointed up at the ceiling or whatever. You just kind of sit in one spot, and you know kind of the limits of where your light is. That I know that I can, anything here to like over here, including this group over here, is kind of all fair game, but anything beyond that might not be so good. And then the last image right here. Great, yeah, just make it orange. That's exactly what I wanted. Can we get a little more magenta up in here? So I think there's actually magenta lights kind of coming in on here too. So I don't know if I can get it to look the way that I want it to look. It's probably as close as I'll get, and then I'm going to roll that back a little bit. Then I'm gonna come in here. Yeah, just complete darkness. Goodbye, gentlemen. Something like this, and then just kind of clean that up a little bit. So what I'm doing is just affecting just this corner, making it a little more green so it kind of matches a little bit better. Overall, the focus point is a groom right here, and I guess like closest family is closest. So this is with me flash on my camera, bouncing my flash off of a wall. I think it's like a gray, like a dark gray wall, but it's bringing enough light back to light the scene like this because it was kind of a neutral-ish color. That's probably why this guy over here is lit a little bit weird, because he's the closest to the weird color kind of coming at. And also it's shot with a camera that has a little bit, maybe too much magenta going on at this time. So dialing it back, I'm pretty happy overall with that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this. And I hope that you enjoyed. And I hope that you really saw how that single light really just brought everything to the next level. That you're like, Taylor, he's an okay photographer. He shouldn't be on YouTube. And then the light, you're like, yeah, this guy knows what's up. So I'll be changing the color of this light during the next couple of videos that I do. And you can comment with the light color in those videos if you want. You probably shouldn't because it's weird, but I don't know. Thanks for being here. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you learned a few things from this. And if you want to go fully in depth into all of my editing across all applications, including Photoshop, please come over to Patreon. And if this is the first week of April that you're listening to this and you're watching this, if this is the first week of April, there are all of my courses available on Patreon. So any course that I've ever made, $2,000, I'm going to ballpark it at that, worth of stuff that you just have access to for $30. So come on over there for the month. Join us for 1 month. Get that. Get the Introvert's Guide to Posing. Get my off-camera flash course. Get Book More Weddings 2020. And all kinds of other things. There's all kinds of stuff over there. It's crazy deal. Thanks for being here. See you next time.